Standing in that glittering ballroom champagne glass trembling in my hand, I watched my mother-in-law Patricia Whitmore deliver the cruelest words that would ultimately destroy her entire world. "Look at that fat pig stuffing her face," she whispered to her socialite friends, pointing directly at me. Little did she know, tucked safely in my purse was the signed contract that would make me her new boss come Monday morning. The empire she had built through decades of manipulation was about to crumble. But before we dive into how I brought down the queen bee of high society, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever dealt with a toxic mother-in-law, and make sure to subscribe because this story of family vengeance gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you will not want to miss how karma served Patricia Whitmore the most delicious slice of humble pie. My name is Vivian Brooks, and for 3 years I had endured Patricia Whitmore's relentless psychological warfare, disguised as family gatherings. Every Sunday dinner became a battlefield, where she would launch calculated attacks on my appearance, my career choices, and my worthiness to be married to her precious son Marcus. The night that changed everything started like any other charity gala at the prestigious Whitmore Foundation headquarters. Patricia had built her reputation as the philanthropic darling of our city, hosting elaborate events that raised millions for various causes while simultaneously feeding her insatiable ego. She demanded that Marcus and I attend every single one, using these gatherings as opportunities to showcase her power and remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. I had spent weeks preparing for this particular gala, purchasing a stunning emerald dress that accentuated my curves and made me feel confident. Marcus had complimented me before we left, telling me I looked radiant. But the moment we stepped into the marble-floored ballroom, Patricia's icy blue eyes scanned me from head to toe with undisguised disgust. The evening progressed with the usual parade of wealthy donors, political figures, and society members, all vying for Patricia's attention. She moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting praise and donations with practiced grace. Meanwhile, I found myself gravitating toward the elaborate buffet table more out of nervousness than hunger. That was when I overheard the conversation that would forever change the trajectory of our relationship. Patricia was standing near the dessert station with her inner circle of wealthy socialites, including Margaret Ashford and Diana Sterling, women who had known her since their debutante days. I was reaching for a small chocolate tart when Patricia's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a knife. "Honestly, I do not understand what Marcus sees in her," Patricia said, her voice carrying just loud enough for me to hear every devastating word. "Look at that fat pig stuffing her face. She has absolutely no self-control or class. It is embarrassing to introduce her as my daughter-in-law." Margaret tittered nervously. "Patricia, perhaps you should lower your voice." "Why should I?" Patricia continued, emboldened by what she perceived as a captive audience. "Everyone can see what I see. She is completely beneath our family standards. Marcus could have married anyone, literally anyone with proper breeding and refinement. Instead, he chose this pathetic creature who clearly has never met a dessert she did not devour." Diana added fuel to the fire. "I heard she works at some little marketing company. Hardly the kind of prestigious career befitting a Whitmore wife." The chocolate tart slipped from my fingers, hitting the marble floor with a soft splat. The sound seemed to echo through my consciousness as Patricia's cruel laughter followed. She had noticed my reaction and was clearly delighted by my obvious distress. "Oh dear, even the desserts are trying to escape from her," Patricia said with mock concern. "Perhaps that is a sign from the universe." My face burned with humiliation as nearby guests began to stare. Some looked sympathetic, others appeared entertained by the drama unfolding before them. Marcus was across the room, deep in conversation with potential donors, completely unaware that his mother was publicly destroying his wife's dignity. I excused myself and fled to the ladies' room, where I locked myself in a stall and tried to compose myself. Tears of rage and embarrassment streamed down my face as Patricia's words echoed in my mind. This was not the first time she had attacked my appearance, but doing so publicly at her own charity event felt like a new level of cruelty. As I stood there attempting to repair my makeup and salvage what remained of my dignity, I made a decision that would alter the course of our family dynamic forever. I was done being Patricia's verbal punching bag. I was done allowing her to treat me like an inferior being who had somehow tricked her son into marriage. What Patricia did not know, what nobody at that gala knew, was that I had been working on something significant for the past 6 months. My little marketing company had actually been acquired by a major corporation, and I had been promoted to regional director with oversight responsibilities that extended far beyond what anyone imagined. The acquisition had been kept confidential while legal paperwork was finalized, and my new role included managing several subsidiary companies and their charitable foundations. Among these newly acquired assets was something that would give me unprecedented power over Patricia's carefully constructed world. When I returned to the ballroom, Patricia was still holding court near the bar, regaling her friends with stories of her latest European vacation. She glanced at me dismissively when I walked past, clearly pleased with herself for having put me in my place once again. Marcus appeared at my side, finally free from his donor conversations. "How are you enjoying the evening, darling?" he asked, placing a protective arm around my waist. "It has been absolutely enlightening," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your mother certainly knows how to make an impression." He missed the underlying tension in my words, too accustomed to his mother's behavior to recognize when it had crossed new boundaries. We made polite conversation with various guests for the remainder of the evening, but my mind was already working on the plan that would bring Patricia's reign of terror to an end. As we prepared to leave, Patricia approached us near the coat check, her expression radiating false warmth and satisfaction. "Vivian, dear, I hope you enjoyed yourself tonight," she said with syrupy sweetness that did not reach her eyes. "Perhaps next time you might consider the salmon instead of visiting the dessert table quite so frequently." The final insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep while maintaining plausible deniability. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me, finally recognizing the venom in his mother's words. "Mother, that was unnecessary," he said quietly. Patricia waved away his objection. "Oh, darling, I am just looking out for her health. Someone has to." That night, as I lay in bed replaying the evening's events, I realized that Patricia's cruelty had actually done me a favor. She had shown her true character in front of witnesses, and more importantly, she had motivated me to use the power I had been reluctant to wield. The signed contract in my purse represented more than just a career advancement. It was the key to Patricia's downfall, and she had just given me every reason to use it without mercy. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that seemed to promise new beginnings. I sat in my car outside the gleaming headquarters of Morrison & Associates, the marketing firm where I had built my career from junior account executive to senior director over 8 years. Today would be my final day as an employee, and tomorrow I would begin my new role as Regional Operations Director for Pinnacle Corporate Solutions. The acquisition had been in the works since spring, with Pinnacle quietly purchasing several mid-sized companies across the region to create a comprehensive business services empire. What made this particularly satisfying was that Pinnacle's portfolio included management contracts for numerous charitable foundations and nonprofit organizations throughout the city, including the Whitmore Foundation. I had discovered this delicious detail 3 weeks ago during my orientation briefings, but the full implications had not crystallized until Saturday night's public humiliation. As I reviewed the Foundation's file that morning, I learned that Patricia's organization was actually struggling financially despite its glamorous facade. Years of mismanagement, excessive administrative costs, and questionable expense allocations had left the foundation dependent on Pinnacle's oversight to maintain its nonprofit status. My assistant Sarah knocked on my office door, interrupting my research. "Vivian there is someone here to see you. She says she is family but would not give her name." I looked up from the Whitmore Foundation's audit reports, curious about this unexpected visitor. "Please send her in." Patricia Whitmore swept into my office like she owned the building, her designer handbag clutched in one manicured hand and her phone in the other. She was dressed in her usual armor of expensive clothing and perfectly applied makeup, but there was something different about her demeanor. She looked slightly frazzled, which was unusual for someone who prided herself on maintaining absolute control at all times. "Vivian, we need to discuss what happened Saturday night." she began without preamble, settling herself into the chair across from my desk, as if she had been invited. I may have spoken a bit harshly, and Marcus has been quite upset about it. I leaned back in my chair, studying her carefully. This was the first time Patricia had ever acknowledged that her behavior might have been inappropriate, let alone apologetic enough to seek me out personally. "I see," I said neutrally. "And what exactly do you think happened Saturday night?" Patricia shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to being questioned. "Well, perhaps I was a bit too direct in my observations. You know how passionate I become about maintaining proper standards at foundation events. The non-apology was so perfectly Patricia that I almost smiled. She was incapable of taking genuine responsibility for her cruelty, instead framing it as dedication to excellence. But what interested me more was why she was here at all. "Patricia, why are you really here?" I asked directly. Her composure cracked slightly. "Someone has been asking questions about the Foundation's finances. Apparently there is going to be some kind of audit or review. I thought perhaps you might have heard something through your marketing contacts." The pieces clicked into place. Patricia's sources in the nonprofit community had given her advance warning about Pinnacle's impending management review, but she had no idea that her despised daughter-in-law was about to become her new supervisor. "What kind of questions?" I asked, maintaining my innocent tone. "Budget allocations, expense reports, that sort of thing. Completely routine, I am sure, but it would be helpful to know what to expect." Patricia's voice carried just a hint of desperation beneath her usual commanding tone. I pretended to consider this. Well, I suppose I could ask around, see if anyone has heard anything about increased scrutiny of charitable foundations. The relief on Patricia's face was unmistakable. For the first time in our 3-year relationship, she needed something from me, and she was actually treating me with something resembling respect. "That would be wonderful, Vivian. I would be very grateful for any information you could provide." Grateful. Patricia Whitmore, the woman who had called me a fat pig 48 hours earlier, was asking for my help and expressing gratitude. The irony was so rich it was almost intoxicating. "Of course," I said sweetly. "I will see what I can find out." After Patricia left, I spent the rest of the day reviewing every document related to the Whitmore Foundation. What I discovered was even worse than I had initially suspected. Patricia had been using foundation funds for personal expenses, disguising luxury travel and shopping sprees as business costs. She had inflated her salary to nearly double what comparable foundation executives earned, and she had been paying several family friends exorbitant consulting fees for minimal work. Most damaging of all, only 60% of donated funds were actually reaching the causes the foundation claimed to support. The rest disappeared into administrative costs overhead and Patricia's personal slush fund. Tuesday morning, I walked into Pinnacle's executive offices for my first official day as Regional Operations Director. My new corner office overlooked the city's financial district with floor-to-ceiling windows that made me feel like I was surveying my domain from a tower. My new assistant, Jennifer, had prepared a stack of files requiring my immediate attention, with the Whitmore Foundation audit at the top of the pile. Attached was a note from my supervisor, David Richardson, requesting a preliminary assessment by the end of the week. I spent the morning familiarizing myself with Pinnacle's protocols for foundation management and compliance issues. The company took its fiduciary responsibilities seriously, with strict guidelines for addressing financial irregularities and clear procedures for removing foundation leadership when necessary. Around noon, Jennifer buzzed my office. "Mrs. Brooks there is a Patricia Whitmore on line 1. She says she is calling about the information you promised to gather." Perfect timing. I picked up the phone with genuine enthusiasm. "Patricia, how lovely to hear from you so soon." "Vivian, were you able to learn anything about these audit inquiries?" The anxiety in her voice was more pronounced now. "Actually, I have some very interesting news," I said, savoring every word. "It turns out I am in a unique position to help you with your foundation concerns." "Oh, wonderful. What did you discover?" "Well, it seems that effective today, I have been appointed as the Regional Operations Director for Pinnacle Corporate Solutions. And Patricia, you will never guess which foundation falls under my direct oversight." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. When Patricia finally spoke, Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I am your new boss, Patricia. Every financial decision, every expense report, every budget allocation for the Whitmore Foundation now requires my approval. Is that not fascinating?" Another long pause, then Patricia's voice returned with its familiar edge of steel. "This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake." "No mistake at all. In fact, I have been reviewing your foundation's records all morning, and I must say there are some very interesting discrepancies that require immediate attention. I think we should schedule a formal meeting to discuss them." The sound of Patricia hanging up the phone was the sweetest music I had heard in years. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Marcus appeared in my doorway, looking haggard and confused, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he had not slept well, and his nervous energy filled the room as he paced near my desk. "Vivian, what is going on?" he asked without his usual greeting kiss. "My mother called me at 6 this morning, absolutely hysterical. She was ranting about you having some kind of power over her foundation and threatening to destroy her life's work." I set down my coffee cup and studied my husband's face carefully. Marcus was a good man with a genuinely kind heart, but he had spent 35 years trained to see his mother as infallible. Patricia had conditioned him to automatically assume that any conflict involving her was the fault of the other party. "Your mother's foundation is under financial review," I said calmly. "That is a standard procedure when corporate management changes occur. But she says you are personally targeting her because of some family disagreement. She insists you are trying to ruin her reputation over a misunderstanding." The word misunderstanding made my blood pressure rise. Patricia had apparently reframed her public humiliation of me as a minor miscommunication, conveniently omitting the deliberate cruelty of her words. "Marcus, do you know what your mother said to me Saturday night?" I asked directly. He shifted uncomfortably. "She mentioned there might have been some awkward conversation, but nothing serious." Of course, Patricia had gotten to him first, controlling the narrative, before I could present my side. This was exactly the kind of manipulation she excelled at, positioning herself as the victim while painting me as vindictive and unreasonable. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Actually, I have something you should hear." Marcus looked puzzled as I pressed play. The device contained audio from Saturday night recorded on my phone when I had accidentally activated the voice memo function while fumbling for tissues in my purse during Patricia's cruel commentary. His mother's voice filled the office with crystal clarity. "Look at that fat pig stuffing her face. She has absolutely no self-control or class. It is embarrassing to introduce her as my daughter-in-law." Marcus's face went pale as the recording continued, capturing every vicious word Patricia had spoken about me to her socialite friends. When it reached the part about the desserts trying to escape from me, his hands clenched into fists. "Jesus Christ, Vivian," he whispered when the recording ended. "I had no idea she said those things." "Your mother did not tell you about calling me a fat pig in front of 50 people, I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the pain that still lingered from that night. Marcus sank into the chair across from my desk, looking genuinely stricken. "She told me there was a minor disagreement about dietary choices. She made it sound like she had suggested you try the fish instead of dessert, and you had overreacted." The depth of Patricia's manipulation was breathtaking. She had completely rewritten the events to portray herself as offering helpful health advice, while I responded with irrational sensitivity. "Marcus, I need you to understand something," I said, leaning forward. "This was not a minor disagreement. Your mother deliberately humiliated me in public, using language designed to cause maximum emotional damage. And this was not an isolated incident. She has been systematically undermining my self-esteem and our marriage for 3 years. My husband sat in stunned silence processing this information. I could see the internal struggle playing out across his features as years of conditioned loyalty to his mother collided with the undeniable evidence of her cruelty. "What are you going to do?" he asked quietly. "I am going to do my job," I replied. "The Whitmore Foundation has serious financial irregularities that require immediate attention. Your mother's personal feelings about me do not change my professional obligations." Marcus nodded slowly, but I could see the conflict still raging behind his eyes. "Can you promise me you will be fair, despite everything she said?" His question stung more than I expected. Even after hearing his mother's vicious attack on me, Marcus still felt the need to ask for fairness toward Patricia. But I also understood that his entire worldview was crumbling, and he needed time to process this new reality. "I will be completely fair," I promised. "Every decision I make will be based on facts and financial evidence, nothing else." That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Margaret Ashford, one of Patricia's socialite friends who had witnessed Saturday night's incident. Margaret's voice was tentative and apologetic as she asked if we could meet privately. We arranged to have coffee at a quiet cafe downtown, away from the social circles where Margaret and Patricia normally moved. When she arrived, Margaret looked older than her 60 years, with worry lines etched around her eyes. "Vivian, I owe you an apology," she began immediately. "What Patricia said about you Saturday night was unconscionable, and I should have spoken up." I was surprised by her directness. Margaret had always seemed like Patricia's loyal follower, someone who would never break ranks with the queen bee of their social circle. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked gently. Margaret hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Because Patricia called me yesterday asking me to lie for her. She wants me to tell anyone who asks that Saturday night never happened or that you misunderstood what she said." The audacity was stunning. Patricia was not only attempting to rewrite history, she was recruiting witnesses to support her false narrative. "She also asked me to call your new company and complain about your professionalism," Margaret continued. "She wants me to claim that you have been harassing her and using your position for personal revenge." This revelation showed how desperate Patricia had become. She was willing to orchestrate a campaign of lies to undermine my credibility and potentially destroy my career. "Are you going to do it?" I asked. Margaret shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. Patricia has been my friend for 20 years, but what she did to you was cruel and inexcusable, and now she wants me to participate in covering it up by attacking your livelihood." She paused, looking directly into my eyes. "I have 2 daughters, Vivian. If someone treated either of them the way Patricia treated you, I would want justice." Her words were like a balm to my wounded spirit. For the first time since Saturday night, someone from Patricia's world was acknowledging the reality of what had happened and taking my side. "There is something else you should know," Margaret added quietly. "Patricia has been talking about you like this for months, not just Saturday night. She refers to you as Marcus's mistake and makes jokes about your appearance whenever you are not around. Saturday was just the first time she was careless enough to do it publicly." The revelation that Patricia's cruelty extended far beyond what I had witnessed was both painful and validating. It confirmed that her behavior was not impulsive or accidental, but part of a sustained campaign of emotional abuse. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Margaret smiled sadly. "Because someone needs to hold her accountable, and it looks like that someone is you. Patricia has spent decades believing she can treat people however she wants without consequences. Maybe it is time she learned otherwise." As we parted ways, Margaret handed me her business card. "If you need someone to testify about what really happened Saturday night, or about anything else Patricia has said, please call me." That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing the Whitmore Foundation's financial records with fresh eyes. Patricia's pattern of manipulation extended far beyond her personal relationships into every aspect of her professional life. She had built an empire on lies, cruelty, and the assumption that nobody would ever challenge her authority. But empires built on such foundations are inherently unstable, and Patricia was about to discover that karma has perfect timing and an excellent memory. The stage was set for her downfall, and she had provided all the ammunition I needed to bring her reign of terror to a decisive end. Friday morning arrived with the kind of electric tension that precedes a thunderstorm. I had scheduled the formal audit meeting with Patricia for 10 o'clock, giving me enough time to prepare the evidence that would dismantle her carefully constructed facade once and for all. Jennifer had arranged the conference room on the 15th floor with its panoramic view of the city and imposing mahogany table that seemed designed for delivering life-changing news. I arrived early to organize the financial documents, expense reports, and bank statements that told the story of Patricia's systematic fraud. At exactly 10 o'clock, Patricia swept into the conference room, dressed in her most intimidating power suit, accompanied by her attorney Robert Kensington, a silver-haired man whose expensive watch and Italian shoes suggested he specialized in protecting wealthy clients from inconvenient consequences. "Vivian," Patricia said coldly, taking the seat across from me without offering a greeting, "I trust we can resolve this misunderstanding quickly. I have a lunch appointment with the mayor." Her arrogance was breathtaking. Even facing a formal audit, Patricia assumed she could control the situation through sheer force of personality and social connections. She had no idea that her world was about to implode. "Of course," I replied pleasantly. "Let us begin with your expense reports from the past 2 years." I slid a thick folder across the table. Patricia opened it with barely concealed irritation, but her expression changed rapidly as she recognized the documents inside. Her face drained of color as she realized the scope of evidence I had assembled. "These are private financial records," Kensington interjected. "My client has privacy rights that protect her from this kind of invasive scrutiny." "Actually, Mr. Kensington, these are corporate foundation documents that Mrs. Whitmore signed authorization for Pinnacle to review as part of our management agreement," I explained calmly. "Every transaction listed here was funded by charitable donations intended for specific causes." I opened my laptop and projected the first exhibit onto the conference room screen. "Patricia, can you explain why the Whitmore Foundation paid $47,000 for what is listed as educational conference attendance, but appears to be a 2-week vacation in Tuscany?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as hotel receipts, spa treatments, and wine tours filled the screen. Her attorney leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear, but she waved him away with growing panic. "That was a legitimate networking opportunity," she finally managed. "I met with several European philanthropists during that trip." "I see," I continued, clicking to the next slide. "And these meetings took place at the luxury resort spa where you charged $8,000 in massage therapy to foundation accounts." The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. 2 years of fraudulent expenses, inflated salaries, and misappropriated funds painted a clear picture of systematic theft from charitable organizations. But the most damaging revelation was yet to come. "Patricia, I also discovered something interesting about your consultant payments," I said, pulling up a new set of documents. "You have been paying your sister Diana Sterling $60,000 annually for strategic advisory services. Can you describe what services she provided?" Patricia's face went ashen. Diana had been present during Saturday night's humiliation, laughing along, as Patricia destroyed my dignity in public. Now their family connection was exposed as part of the fraud scheme. "Diana provides valuable insights into fundraising strategies," Patricia said weakly. "According to these records, Diana's only qualification is a high school diploma and 30 years as a housewife. Yet she receives more compensation than most foundation employees with advanced degrees and decades of nonprofit experience." Kensington tried to intervene again, but I was not finished. The final piece of evidence would demonstrate the true scope of Patricia's betrayal of the charitable community. Most importantly, Patricia, only 62% of donated funds actually reached the causes your foundation claims to support. The remaining 38% disappeared into administrative costs, personal expenses, and fraudulent consultant payments. I clicked to a graph showing the stark comparison between the Whitmore Foundation's spending and industry standards. While comparable organizations allocated 80 to 90% of donations directly to charitable causes, Patricia had been treating donor money as her personal piggy bank. Families donated their life savings believing they were funding cancer research, children's education, and disaster relief. I continued, my voice gaining strength. Instead, they were financing your luxury lifestyle and paying your friends for non-existent work. Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a snarl. "You self-righteous little nobody. You think you can destroy me over some petty family squabble? I have connections in this city that you could never imagine." Her mask of civility had completely fallen away, revealing the ugly truth beneath her polished exterior. Even her attorney looked uncomfortable as Patricia's true nature emerged. "This has nothing to do with family relationships," I replied calmly. "This is about criminal fraud, embezzlement, and theft from charitable organizations. Your connections cannot change mathematical evidence." Kensington finally managed to restrain his client. "We need to discuss plea options," he whispered urgently. But Patricia was beyond reason, her rage and desperation overwhelming any remaining judgment. "You fat, pathetic nobody. Marcus will never choose you over me. I am his mother. I built this foundation from nothing, and I will not let some second-rate marketing girl destroy my life's work." The conference room fell silent as Patricia's venom filled the air. Her attorney looked mortified, realizing that his client had just provided additional evidence of her character and motivations in front of witnesses. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said quietly, "your life's work appears to consist of stealing money from cancer patients and disaster victims while publicly humiliating family members for your own entertainment. That is not something worth preserving." I closed my laptop and gathered the evidence files. Pinnacle Corporate Solutions is terminating its management agreement with the Whitmore Foundation effective immediately. We will be referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation and the State Attorney General for civil fraud charges. Patricia's face contorted with fury and disbelief. "You cannot do this. I have board members, major donors' political connections." "Your board members resigned yesterday after reviewing preliminary evidence," I informed her. "Your major donors are demanding refunds, and your political connections are distancing themselves as quickly as possible to avoid guilt by association." The truth was that Patricia's empire had been built on sand held together only by her ability to intimidate people into silence and compliance. Once the financial evidence emerged, her support network crumbled overnight. As Patricia and her attorney gathered their belongings in stunned silence, I felt a profound sense of justice finally being served. The woman who had spent 3 years systematically destroying my self-esteem while stealing from charities was about to face the consequences of her choices. "Patricia," I called as she reached the conference room door. "One more thing. The recording of your comments about me Saturday night has been provided to the media outlets covering your fraud case. I thought the public should understand the character of the person who stole their charitable donations." Patricia's final look of absolute hatred and defeat was the most satisfying moment of my entire career. The Queen Bee's reign of terror was officially over. The news of Patricia's downfall spread through the city's social and business networks with the speed and intensity of wildfire. By Monday morning, local television stations were running continuous coverage of the Whitmore Foundation scandal, complete with footage of Patricia being escorted from her office building by federal investigators. The audio recording of her calling me a fat pig had become the soundtrack to her public disgrace, played repeatedly on radio shows and social media platforms. The contrast between her charitable public image and her private cruelty created exactly the kind of hypocrisy scandal that captivated public attention and refused to fade quietly. I watched the morning news from my office sipping coffee while reporters detailed the scope of Patricia's fraud. The anchor announced that over $2 million in charitable donations had been misappropriated, affecting dozens of local causes, including children's hospitals, homeless shelters, and disaster relief funds. Jennifer knocked on my door with an update that made the morning even sweeter. "Mrs. Brooks, the district attorney's office called. They want to schedule an interview about your testimony for the grand jury proceedings." Patricia was not just facing civil penalties and professional disgrace. Criminal charges were imminent, with potential prison time that would ensure her reign of terror could never resume. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Can we have dinner tonight? We need to talk." The conversation with my husband would be difficult, but necessary. Patricia's arrest had forced him to confront the reality of his mother's character, and our marriage needed honest discussion about moving forward. Around noon, Margaret Ashford called with news from Patricia's social circle. "Vivian, you should know that Patricia tried to rally support at the country club yesterday. She wanted the ladies' auxiliary to issue a statement defending her character. "How did that go?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Complete disaster," Margaret replied with obvious satisfaction. "When she started ranting about you being a vindictive nobody who had orchestrated her downfall, several women walked out. Diana Sterling actually defended you, saying Patricia's behavior toward you had been inexcusable for years." The irony was perfect. Patricia's own cruelty had turned even her closest allies against her when the truth finally emerged. Her inability to take responsibility or show genuine remorse had completed her social destruction. "There is more," Margaret continued. "The country club board met this morning and revoked her membership. Apparently, several major donors threatened to withdraw their support if she remained affiliated with the club. Patricia's entire world was systematically collapsing. The social status, professional reputation, and family connections she had spent decades building were dissolving as people realized the true nature of her character. That evening, Marcus arrived home looking exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a tremendous burden had been lifted from his shoulders. We sat in our kitchen over Chinese takeout, the informal setting helping to ease the tension between us. "I spoke with my mother today," he began quietly. "She is refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Even facing criminal charges, she insists this is all your fault for being vindictive about family disagreements." I nodded, unsurprised by Patricia's continued inability to accept responsibility. "How are you handling all this?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his untouched food. "Honestly, part of me is relieved. I have spent my entire life making excuses for her behavior, explaining away her cruelty as high standards or tough love. Seeing the evidence of her fraud, hearing that recording of how she talked about you, I finally understand who she really is." His admission was more than I had dared hope for. Marcus was not just supporting me, he was genuinely recognizing the patterns of manipulation and abuse that had shaped our family dynamic. "She called me this morning demanding that I choose between her and you," he continued. "She said no son should put his wife before his mother, and that family loyalty requires me to support her against outside attacks." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that family loyalty works both ways, and she forfeited mine when she decided to steal from charities and treat my wife like garbage." Marcus reached across the table to take my hand. "I chose you, Vivian, not just because you are my wife, but because you are a genuinely good person who deserves respect and love." The validation I had waited 3 years to hear finally came, but it felt different than I had imagined. Rather than triumphant, I felt sad for the broken family relationships and the pain that Patricia's choices had caused everyone involved. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we build something better," Marcus replied firmly. "We create the kind of family based on respect and genuine care, not manipulation and cruelty. And we make sure our future children never experience the kind of toxic dynamics I grew up thinking were normal." 2 days later, Patricia's attorney called to inform me that she wanted to arrange a meeting. Against Marcus's advice, I agreed to see her one final time, curious about what she could possibly want to say. We met at her attorney's office, where Patricia sat across from me, looking like a shadow of her former self. Her perfect appearance had cracked, along with her composure revealing a bitter, desperate woman whose carefully constructed world had completely collapsed. "I want you to know that I will never forgive you for this," she began without preamble. "You have destroyed my life's work over a few careless comments at a party." Even facing prison time, Patricia could not acknowledge the scope of her wrongdoing or take genuine responsibility for her choices. The fraud, the theft, the years of emotional abuse were all reduced to a few careless comments in her mind. "Patricia," I said quietly, "I did not destroy your life's work. I simply documented it accurately. Your life's work was stealing from charities and hurting people. That was always going to catch up with you eventually." She stared at me with undiluted hatred, unable to comprehend that her downfall was the natural consequence of her own actions rather than external persecution. "You will regret this," she said finally. "Marcus will come back to me eventually. Family bonds are stronger than marriage. I smiled sadly at her continued delusion. Patricia Marcus has finally seen who you really are. There is no coming back from that. As I left the attorney's office, I felt a profound sense of closure. Patricia's threats and manipulations no longer had any power over me or my family. Her empire of cruelty had collapsed under the weight of its own corruption, and justice was finally being served. 6 months later, I stood in the same ballroom where Patricia had publicly humiliated me, but this time I was there for a very different purpose. The space had been transformed for the inaugural Gala of the Phoenix Foundation, a new charitable organization dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud and family abuse. The evening represented everything Patricia's foundation had pretended to be, but never was genuine philanthropy, transparent financial management, and respect for every person who walked through the doors. Margaret Ashford had become our board chair, bringing with her several former Whitmore Foundation donors who were eager to support authentic charitable work. Marcus stood beside me, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but more importantly, radiating the kind of peace that comes from living authentically. The past months had been challenging as he worked through years of conditioning and family trauma, but our marriage was stronger than it had ever been. "Are you nervous?" he asked, adjusting his tie as guests began arriving. "Not nervous," I replied, smoothing my midnight blue dress. "Excited. This is what real philanthropy looks like." The contrast with Patricia's galas was striking. Instead of ostentatious displays of wealth designed to feed egos, our event focused entirely on the causes we supported and the people we served. Survivors of various types of abuse shared their stories, explaining how proper charitable support had helped them rebuild their lives. Diana Sterling approached us during the cocktail hour, looking genuinely apologetic and much more humble than I remembered. Patricia's sister had cooperated fully with prosecutors, providing evidence about the fraudulent consultant payments and expressing genuine remorse for her role in the scheme. "Vivian, I wanted to thank you again for not pressing additional charges against me," she said quietly. "I know I did not deserve your mercy." "Everyone deserves a chance to make things right," I replied. "Your testimony helped ensure justice was served." Diana had used her insider knowledge to help investigators trace the full scope of Patricia's fraud, leading to the recovery of nearly $800,000 in misappropriated funds. The money had been returned to affected charities and victims, providing some measure of restitution for Patricia's crimes. The evening's keynote speaker was Sarah Martinez, a former cancer patient whose family had donated their life savings to what they believed was Patricia's cancer research fund. Instead, their money had financed Patricia's European vacation, while Sarah struggled to afford treatment. When I learned that my family's sacrifice had paid for luxury spas instead of medical research, I felt completely betrayed, Sarah told the audience. But tonight, seeing how this foundation operates with complete transparency, I have hope again. Real change happens when good people refuse to accept corruption and demand better. Her words resonated throughout the ballroom, reminding everyone present why accountability and integrity mattered so much in charitable work. The applause was genuine and sustained, reflecting the audience's commitment to supporting authentic philanthropy. Later in the evening, Jennifer found me near the silent auction displays with an update that brought perfect closure to Patricia's story. "Mrs. Brooks, I thought you should know that the sentencing hearing concluded this afternoon. Patricia had ultimately pled guilty to 12 counts of charitable fraud and embezzlement, avoiding a lengthy trial, but ensuring significant consequences for her crimes. The judge had been particularly harsh, noting that stealing from cancer patients and disaster victims represented a special kind of moral bankruptcy. 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation," Jennifer continued. "She also has to pay full restitution plus penalties, which will likely require selling her house and liquidating her assets." The sentence was everything I had hoped for meaningful prison time that acknowledged the severity of her crime's financial consequences, that would prevent her from maintaining her luxury lifestyle and a permanent criminal record that would follow her forever. But more satisfying than Patricia's punishment was the positive change her downfall had created. Her fraud case had prompted new oversight requirements for charitable foundations statewide protecting future donors from similar schemes. The Phoenix Foundation was already funding support services for fraud victims and family abuse survivors, turning Patricia's cruelty into something genuinely beneficial for society. As the evening wound down, Marcus and I found ourselves alone on the ballroom's terrace, looking out over the city lights. The same view that had once represented Patricia's domain now symbolized our fresh start and commitment to building something better. "Do you ever regret how everything happened?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I considered the question seriously. The past year had been difficult with media attention, legal proceedings, and family trauma affecting every aspect of our lives. But it had also brought clarity, justice, and genuine healing. "I regret that it took so long," I said finally. "I regret that I endured her abuse for 3 years before fighting back. But I do not regret exposing the truth or holding her accountable." Marcus nodded against my shoulder. "She called me from prison last week." This was the first I had heard of any contact between them. "What did she say?" "She wanted me to help appeal her sentence. She still insists that you orchestrated everything out of spite and that she is the real victim." Marcus sighed heavily. I told her that until she could acknowledge what she actually did wrong, we had nothing to discuss. His response showed how completely his perspective had transformed. The man who once automatically defended his mother's behavior now held her accountable with clear boundaries and genuine strength. "I love you for becoming the person you were always meant to be," I told him, turning in his arms. "I love you for having the courage to demand better," he replied, kissing me gently. As we drove home that night, I reflected on the journey from Patricia's public humiliation to this moment of triumph and new beginnings. Her cruelty had been intended to diminish me, but instead, it had revealed her own moral bankruptcy and provided the motivation I needed to pursue justice. The woman who had called me a fat pig was now wearing prison uniforms and eating cafeteria food. The foundation she had used as her personal ATM was permanently shuttered. The social status she had lorded over everyone was completely destroyed, and the family loyalty she had demanded was finally directed toward people who actually deserved it. Karma had not just visited Patricia Whitmore, it had moved in permanently, ensuring that her remaining years would be spent facing the consequences of decades of cruelty and corruption. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's cruelty backfired so spectacularly that it seemed like the universe was personally delivering justice? Drop a comment below, sharing your own story of karma coming full circle, because I love hearing how life teaches bullies that their actions have consequences. If this story of family revenge and ultimate vindication resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of justice being served. And please share this video with anyone who needs hope that toxic people eventually face the music for their behavior. Thank you for joining me on this journey from humiliation to triumph. And remember that standing up to bullies and demanding accountability is never wrong, even when those bullies happen to be family. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is refusing to accept unacceptable treatment, because everyone deserves respect and dignity in their relationships.